Uh, just a couple of Zoom or coordinating details. I will, because it's thrilling, we are so many. What I will do is once we turn over the floor to an open conversation, I will follow the chat. I'll follow the chat throughout anyway, and try to moderate and integrate the questions that everybody will have. So the idea tonight is that we have a very, very informal round of presentations, perhaps starting with Debbie, May, and Stacy, Rico and Sully, and then we will turn it over. We will turn it over to the floor and have an open conversation. So if I could ask everybody to please mute yourselves, and I guess the feed will be better if you also turn off your cameras in this initial stage, and then we go from there. Debbie, so let me turn the floor over to you.
Great, thank you so much. Welcome everybody. So I'm gonna speak for 5 to 7 minutes. That's my plan with regard to just a little bit about my background. And I would like to do my share screen. So if you could tell me just to make sure, do you see like a sunflower right now?
Not yet.
Not yet.
See your desktop.
Interesting. Okay, let me try it again. Desktop 2.
Now we do.
Oh, okay.
Now
I think I didn't click it hard enough for something. Okay. Okay, great. So yeah, so a little bit about me. I just want to mention as a side note that I put a couple pictures that are just like very casual pictures from my camera, because I love nature, and with the pandemic and everything, we don't necessarily get to get out in nature as much. So I thought we could just have some pictures. They're random and they're not fancy, but I just think they're really beautiful. So I wanted to share my story as a first generation college student because it's something that's really big part of my identity. And another thing is that I grew up in like a really small town. So I actually went to USD as from 84 to 88, graduated from USD. And I chose USD because it was a really small school. Even though it's a small school, it's well, it was about, at the time, it was over twice as big as the town I came from. So that was even a big jump coming to USD. I chose it too because it was a Catholic school, and also because I'd gone to San Diego at one point and I saw it on the hill, and I'm like, that is beautiful. I want to go there. So like those were kind of like the main reasons I chose USD. If anybody doesn't know what a first generation student is, it means that you're the first person from your family to go to college. And I was the first person in my immediate family to go to college, and the second person in my extended family to graduate from college. One of my cousins beat me by a year. So it's kind of a big deal for us. And you kind of have some like unique perspectives as a first generation student. Another thing I want to mention is I have like tons of interests. And so I think going to USD was really good for me to have a liberal arts education. I think it's great for anybody anyway, but I really appreciated being able to explore all kinds of different things while I was there. And I'm never bored. Like I would like to have more hours in a day because I have so many different things that I love to do. But there's only 24, right? So let me go ahead and I'm gonna go down one here. So when I got to college, I did not even know what a unit was. I didn't know that there were minors. I didn't know any of this stuff. I was on a scholarship. I needed to get out in 4 years. My family had made lots of sacrifices for me to go there, and I knew that they were so excited for me to be there. And they wanted me to succeed. So there were like all these pressures and expectations that I had inside of me, right? This kind of like weight of the family name moving forward, you know, and everything. And that's a lot of weight. It was something that really pushed me to do really well in school. So I was very concerned about that. And I want to let you know, early on, my first semester, I took this class, a religion course, and I got my first paper back, and I got a C on the paper. And it was, I'm used to getting A's. Like in high school, I thought I knew what I was doing, and like I thought I could study well and everything. I did not know till I got to college that how hard it was. And I got a C on my paper. And the professor said that he wanted me to come to his office and talk to him about it. And he's like, I don't even see a thesis statement. Like, where's your thesis statement? And I'm like, what's a thesis statement? Like, I didn't even know what the heck he was talking about, right? So it was like, obviously there were like certain things that I didn't know. But from that, I learned if I go to office hours, I am going to get a lot out. I'm going to learn extra stuff, right? So valuable that I learned that. And I started going to office hours for all my different classes, and it helped me to be successful. That was so important. And then another thing with that is I also learned about the writing center. And it's kind of like it's a shameless plug for the writing center, but I learned that I could become a better writer if I went to the writing center. So those are two big takeaways that really, really helped me. And then another thing, as I mentioned, college was like way harder than I thought it was going to be. And so I figured that I really have to figure out, how to step up my game to be able to succeed in college. It was really, really hard, but I started to learn in first semester that, you know what, I can do this. I can do this. And it was really hard at first. And another thing that I just want to mention is that I felt like I was starting with certain deficits. Like I didn't take any AP. We didn't have it at my school. I didn't even know what a thesis statement was. I didn't know, like I said, a lot of things I didn't know. But the other thing that was really cool was that there were some things that I had that were assets that were really helpful. And I didn't realize how helpful they were until I got there. So I had several jobs by the time I got to college. So I knew how to manage my money. I knew how to manage and juggle a lot of responsibilities. I had a lot of responsibilities in the home. And suddenly I didn't have those, but I had new responsibilities, but I was able to juggle those. So I think those things really, really helped me. So my point is, it's like, even though there's some things I didn't have, there's other things that I really had in place that were able to help me succeed. And that was really cool. And then, so in terms of big picture, finding my path, I decided to major in chemistry. I really like working with my hands a lot, and chemistry is very hands-on. And I really found that I loved the challenge of it. I love you're working so hard and then you finally get it. Like, even though it was so hard, when I would get something, it was a very rewarding experience. And I figured there's always going to be something I don't know, and that I will always be able to continue learning in chemistry. So I thought that was really, really cool. And Daniel, I seriously thought about architecture major when I was in high school because drafting was my favorite class. I just want to mention that.
Wonderful.
And so the other thing I want to mention is I decided I want to go to graduate school because I really didn't know what I wanted to do, but I figured if I got some more education, then it would kind of give me more opportunities. And I started at a higher pay scale when I started getting a job. And when I told my family, they were like, what? You got a bachelor's, that's great. Like, why do you want to go to grad school? So it was kind of interesting because it was hard for them to comprehend that, even though they were so supportive of me going to college. And then lastly, I decided to go ahead and get into teaching because I found that one thing I really like, I like my independence, and it gave me a ton of independence. It's very kind of close to being self-employed in some respects. And I really, really like that. And I love learning and I love working with students. So that's why I chose my career path. And that is it. I am done. Thank you.
Fantastic. Thank you. Thank you, Debbie. Okay. May.
Yeah, I think I'm going to continue. Thank you, Professor Binaggio, for that
Yes.
excellent start. I'm Mei Yang. Probably many of you here. I recognize some of my current students and my old students from last semester. And thank you for being here. I think the topic I'm going to talk about, maybe I've never talked about this in my whole life. I'm surprised. So I'm surprised by myself that I'm talking about it today. But if I start to cry, don't be too surprised. Don't be too shocked. Hopefully that will not happen. So I'm going to actually start with a photo, actually a painting. I'm going to do the screen share function as well. So here you are looking at a painting by Swiss German artist Paul Klee. So this painting doesn't look that spectacular. Maybe some art major maybe have heard of that, or scholars. Um, it looked basically kind of ordinary. It's a little bit strange, right? It does look like a deer, or is it a bird? And then his face is looking at us or looking at somewhere else, but it's facing us. So what does this painting say? According to a very renowned German critic and philosopher, Walter Benjamin, he interprets this painting this way. So when I first read about it, it really struck me. So I'm going to just read it. And I also put a short excerpt here. It's a shortened version. So I'm going to read the complete version of his description about the meaning of this painting. So he said, a clay painting named Angelus Novus, forgive about my German, shows an angel looking as though he is about to move away from something he's fixedly contemplating. His eyes are staring, his mouth is open, his wings are spread. This is how one pictures the angel of history. His face is turned towards the past, where we perceived a chain of events. He sees one single catastrophe which keeps piling wreckage upon wreckage and hurls it in front of his feet. The angel would like to stay, awaken the dead, and make whole what has been smashed. But a storm is blowing from paradise. It has got caught in its wings with such violence that the angel can no longer close them. The storm irresistibly propels him into the future to which his back is turned, while the pile of debris before him grows skyward. This storm is what we call progress. So, when I first encountered this description in my graduate studies, it's just really something is really speaking to me. So over the years, I kept wondering why did this concept, the angel of history and the description that the philosopher Walter Benjamin has put forth really interested me so much. After thinking about it for a long time, gradually, uh, actually, I think it speaks to a puzzle that I had since I was young, since I was a child. When I was 10 years old, I moved from a rural village to a city. So that event was something that everyone else around me congratulated me or congratulated my family on. So basically being able to move, upward from a poor place to a more prosperous city, that was considered a great thing, something great to be celebrated about. However, imagine that from a perspective of 10 years old child at that time, when she has already made friends in her school, in her village. She's already wandering around in the village, playing in the field, playing with animals and her friends. It actually didn't mean anything worthy to celebrate about at all. So it actually meant loss and separation for me. So actually, over the years, because I've moved to so many places, I'm getting used to moving, always, get adapted to a new environment. So I think even myself began to forget that feeling that I had when I was 10 years old moving to a new place. Only a few years ago, when I read my old diary, that my brother kindly kept in a shady bookshelf, that I came across my old diary, then I suddenly remembered that feeling I had, that very vividly. At that time, I think I was dealing with this puzzle. I was trying hard, as a child, trying to reconcile the feeling I had about moving away from my hometown, and everyone else, the kind of social environment, the people around me, their feeling of cheerfulness about being able to move forward, move up to a better place, right? So as a child, I had that instinct feeling that no one maybe cared about how I actually thought of the event of moving. So I kept it to myself. I think, okay, I forgot to mention that I teach literature and film. So I think the charm of literature and art are for me is I get to have conversations with people. Many of them are authors, right? Such as Walter Benjamin, who would actually understand me. That is, I don't feel lonely. I would also think that sometimes we say charm is not good enough. Charm is something we can so easily dismiss. So maybe I can talk about power, right? So the power of literature and arts to me is that it allows me to see that I was actually not alone, that it is very likely that I was not the only person who felt the pain of moving to another place. So maybe people around me also felt a sense of loss, but they just could not afford to deal with it, or because they had many other worries, right? I think the real power, fundamentally, if I come to the bottom of it, is that I actually, as a grown up today, I get to speak for that 10 years old little girl, that old version of myself. I actually get to speak for her, make her understood, hopefully by more people, right? So, and I can also tell her that I have never betrayed her. So, maybe to conclude my speech today, um, maybe we move forward, to learn about the world, to also learn about ourselves, just so that we can go back. Okay, that's my story.
Oh,
So I'll
that's,
stop.
that's really wonderful, May. Thank you so much for that. Wow.
Okay, I'm glad I didn't cry.
Yeah. I almost did.
Thank you, Daniel.
Stacy.
Hi, everybody. Thank you so much for asking us to share our stories tonight, and thank you for starting us off, Professors Finocchio and Yang. Those are really wonderful stories that I think I just want to add to by going back to childhood and going back to this experience of starting college, often without much of a map. I also was the first in my family to go to college, and definitely had family members who didn't really want me to go. So I guess I just wanted to start off and mention that one of the things I think is funny about my story is that when I was 9 years old, I made a resume. So I guess in my elementary school, we already had this idea that we needed a resume. Maybe because a lot of people were expecting to get a job right out of high school in my hometown of Lansing, Michigan. But in any case, I wanted to be specifically a reading teacher. That's what I wrote by hand in my resume. I said I wanted to be a reading teacher. And the other thing that I wanted to do when I was around that age, and that I was already doing, is I was writing, and I wanted to be seen as a writer and as an author. And I actually used to make books. So I never learned how to draw, and I wouldn't recommend my drawings, but I did illustrate the books, and I wrote stories and kind of stapled them together. And then I sold them in our driveway at the garage sales that we had occasionally. And I even mimicked the logo of the, I think it was the Dell Yearling children's books that I just pretended to copy onto my own books. So those are the two things that I think I've always been engaged in, reading and writing and teaching. And so I'm still doing that. I guess now I'm teaching in the English department, and it's a version of being a reading teacher, really. But it really, those two things didn't necessarily mean that I had a straight path. And I think I've really tried out so many different things over the years. So when I first started college, I went to a really small liberal arts college called Kalamazoo College in Michigan. And it was my choices were really between that and the much larger University of Michigan. So I actually chose Kalamazoo because I liked how small it was. It seemed kind of quaint, and I liked the idea that I could just, cross the street and I would be in the English department had their own little brick house, and it was near the tennis courts, and everything just seemed really convenient. And I felt quite comfortable there. The other thing that they told me to get me to go to their school is that I would be able to go on study abroad, which I eventually did. And I went to Thailand for almost a year. And, learned how to speak a little bit of Thai that I still try to practice when I can. But when I got to Kalamazoo, I actually decided to change my major. I was going to be a creative writing major. And just like I was saying, I always loved to write, and I planned to do creative writing. But then I had my first year writing seminar, which is now what I teach at USD. And it was on the topic of race and poverty in the United States. And I just had this sense that taking my British literature classes was not going to solve these very pressing problems that I was learning about, and that I had really seen growing up too. So I ended up changing my major, which I know everyone here, all of the students here are still trying to figure out majors. And if you do decide to change your major, it might seem like a huge decision, kind of scary thing to do. And I think it was really meaningful when I did change my major, but I changed it to political science. And I ended up reading a lot of theories about histories of oppression and structures of power in society. And those things have continued to be really important to me, but thankfully I've found my way back to English literature. I'm now finishing my dissertation in medieval English literature. And I'm bringing the things that I'm studying into my teaching at USD. So some of the students, I actually see some names of students I've had in the past here, and so students I had in the fall and my current students. But one thing that they might tell you is that I do ask them to look at old manuscripts, which is what I've started to do in my research, is to go to special collections, go to the library, and actually look at a manuscript. So, it's really hard to tell your story in only 5 minutes. But I think that's really, that's basically it. I used to teach kids. I taught high school, and now I'm really excited to be teaching at USD and working with you all and being part of this program too, that is more about integrating our academic and social lives. So thanks, everybody.
Thank you so much, Stacy. That was wonderful. Rico. And by the way, I'm just going alphabetical. Alphabet.
Yeah. Hi, everybody. Glad you could all join us tonight. And I like it was just alphabetical, but this is going to pick up nicely right where Stacy left off, because I'm also a first generation college student, the grandson of migrant workers from Mexico. And one of my main goals that I thought of, like why I wanted to be part of this event tonight, is to really emphasize two things. It's okay to be undecided about your major and to really take college as a time to explore. And it's number two, it's okay to radically change your mind. Okay. So if those of you that have had my class or in one of my classes, you'll know right already that I'm a theology and religious studies professor. I started college as a bio major. It was going to be a medical doctor at Harvey Mudd College. Now, if you don't know what Harvey Mudd College is, basically it's like Caltech or MIT, and it's a science and engineering school, but it's about the worst choice I could have made for what I want. Meaning at the time, like if you go to MIT or to Caltech, you can still major in English or history or any of the like humanities, right? At Harvard Med, there were 5 majors. It was bio, physics, chemistry, engineering, mathematics, right? Like it was just like the hard sciences and math, right? And the best thing about it is it helped me understand that while I thought I had loved science as my first love, my passion, my whole life, I really missed history classes. I really missed my English classes. I really missed these things from high school. So I ended up having a very meandering path. I changed my major from bio to then English, but still pre-med, because I didn't want to let go of that right away yet. And then I let go of the pre-med, and then was going to double in English and French. By that point, I changed so many times, it was a little hard to pull off a double major. So I ended up just sticking with the English. So I got an English major. Then I ended up getting a master's in theology. And then later on, I got a PhD in religious studies and the philosophy of religion. So it's really like a philosophy type PhD. So I am like a living embodiment of changing one's mind and taking different types of paths. And also my whole career, intellectual career path is one of interdisciplinary and integration. But I figured out, pretty quickly that the thing I love most is learning. I remember just being in college and thinking like, well, what do I want to do with my life? And I kind of had this moment of like, I really love learning. I love talking to people about like interesting stuff. Like, why are we here? What's the purpose of our lives, both as individuals and as like a society? So I really just was trying to, at that point, figure out what major allowed me the most like breadth to explore these kinds of questions of what it means to be human, both as an individual and then us as a society, as a species. And so I thought about history, I thought about art history, I thought about philosophy, I thought about political science. I think any of those could have worked. I think in the humanities and social sciences, everything is connected. But I landed on English because I felt like English really had this kind of breadth that appealed to me, but it also had like heart and passion to it as well in the literature. Then I was going to go on to, I was going to go on to get a PhD in English, but before I did that, I needed to get my GRE scores up. And so I taught high school for a while. I ended up teaching high school for 6 years. And that's where I actually discovered accidentally that the passion that I had for teaching, that I didn't just have a passion for learning, I had a passion for teaching, and that I didn't want to do anything more than there was nothing else I wanted to be in the world but a teacher, except I hated discipline. I hated it. You know, like detentions, calling parents, you know, like all that stuff. Like it's terrible, terrible. I detest that. So it was at the moment I was like, no, I need to take the step to go to the next level. You know, to teach these things at a college level where I don't have to be a disciplinarian because I hate it. So I applied to PhD programs in English. I got in. I was all ready to go, and then my girlfriend dumped me, and and it gave me what you call an existential crisis. This moment of like, what the heck am I doing, and what, you know, what kind of person am I, that, like, you know, that led to this. You know, it was like a 3-year relationship too. It wasn't like some little relation. Like, I thought I was going to get married, and then it was over, and it was like I knew it was all my fault. And so I 180, I go to seminary, I get a degree in theology. I think I'm going to be a priest at this point, right? And then while I'm there, all the professors are like, look, you know, you really have this inquisitiveness and you have these gifts. You really should think about going on to get a PhD, you know. They kind of were saying like, you know, just being a parish priest, you know, don't you they were trying to steer me away, like to reach a bigger audience or something. So I ended up deciding on religious studies in the end. But all of the other things behind me, the English, the theological work, the reason why they like folded into religious studies really well is religious studies, it's not something where it's just like you're talking about, you know, what do Buddhists believe, what do Christians believe, what do Muslims believe. Although we of course do that, but we do lots of other really push the envelope kind of things. Like, you know, in my classes it'll be like, what's the number one, what are the biggest religions in the world? Well, you could say Christianity, Islam, but I might argue, and so would a lot of other religious studies scholars, that the biggest religions in the world are nationalism and consumerist capitalism. That these actually are the things that carry the manifestation of religion that most people are actually devoted to, like the way people used to be devoted to religion. And so I love talking with students about, my classes, within my class and my office hours. I love discussing everything from Karl Marx to Jesus, from Friedrich Nietzsche to Muhammad, and talking about how all of this plays into like why we're here, and radical political liberatory movements like Stacy was kind of talking about, and the way they connect to spirituality. And I genuinely think at this point that to get paid to do that, to get paid to think about and talk about those things with young people like yourselves, I'm not BSing you. Like, I think I'm like truly one of the luckiest people to have that as my job. So that's my story. It's a meandering one, but I wouldn't do it differently. So
Fantastic. Thank you, Rico. Sally, I don't see you. Are you there? Oh, there you are. Fantastic.
Great. I will follow up with the English thing. Yeah, I feel like I'm in a confessional. I was an English major. Some of my colleagues don't know that, actually, or have been gracious enough to forget it in some ways. But I'm unlike some of the others, especially I think to all the previous speakers, right? Our first generation college students. I was more like the feather in what's the Tom Hanks movie? Forrest Gump, of course, right? So just kind of going where the currents take one, in part because both my parents had advanced degrees. My father was a PhD in a teacher. And so undergraduate, no, I was going to Harvard because I was a faculty brat, right? So tuition remission there, not an issue. Applied for MA program, University of Harvard. Why not? You got additional kind of perks for that, even though I was working full-time at the time. And then for PhD, I'll apply to one place at UMass, got in. So I think that's fairly rare to only apply to one school for each degree and just got in. In fact, my father told me I got into UMass over the phone while I was in Holland on a 4,600-mile bike tour, right? Which is my kind of seminary, I suppose, to follow Federico. And so it was just, yeah, just go with the flow. But my very first year as an undergrad, I was definitely career driven. So I chose English in part for writing. I was going to be a short story writer. And in the interim, before I was making the big bucks, I'd be a journalist, right? That whole story, right? Didn't Hemingway, right, was a journalist? Wasn't Stephen Crane a journalist? I mean, there's this long history, right, of great writers. Whereupon I found out very quickly I would not be a great writer. And indeed, right, the journalistic mode was much better suited for me. After that, though, the Reese's thesis, right, to borrow from Debbie, I did know what a thesis was. and the Reese's thesis has been really important to me. You take two things you really like and put them together. Now, it's peanut butter and chocolate for Reese's. For me, it's media and sports. And so media part really was important for me. In studying communication as a first-year student, as well as studying English and taking Soc and taking Psych. Those four disciplines shaped everything to follow for me as a student, as well as a journalist. So all of those came together, particularly in applying or looking at mediated sports. And so that became one of the directions I wanted to take early on. I wanted to be a sports writer and a sports editor. And so I did paid internships as part of that. Again, not to be overlooked as part of the interdisciplinary education. It is going out there and applying this. And for me, that helped me land jobs. So even before I graduated, I was working full-time for a medium daily. And that was really, important because that gave me skills that actually translated well into this shift in careers, going from journalism to academia. And so got my MA while I was still a full-time journalist, and then dropped it all to get my PhD using my grandmother's money, right? Because she was a teacher. And so I said, there's a good use for the next 3 years, right? And I was going to show you the UMass library. In fact, I will anyways, right? And make my just one observation about that. You can see that picture, I hope, right? It's the Tower Library. It's now the W.E.B. Du Bois Library. It is iconic. Anyone in Western Massachusetts knows the UMass Tower. It's 23 stories. It's highly unusual. This is the library, folks, right? Now, it's not the Geisel Library, so it's not maybe that big a deal, but for those in architecture, it was a huge deal when it was built in the 1960s. The reason I note this is because as an undergrad, I went to the University of Massachusetts Tower Library, which was about 80 miles north of where I had my courses at the University of Hartford. And the reason is one floor is devoted to sociology. And on that floor, in that section, sociology, was one of the best collections of the sociology of sport in all of New England. And so my favorite teacher in sociology said, you should really go there if you want to learn more about the interdisciplinary nature of mediated sports. And that became really important for my master's, which became my first publication, ultimately. And became, of course, significant later on because 6 years later, I ended up going there for my PhD as well. So maybe just a betoken something important about my future. But that thesis sticks with me today. I teach other courses, of course, right? But particularly emphasizing popular culture and the mediation of it, right, is still my general area. And it has been since my freshman year. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Sully. So I'll tell my story very, very quickly because I'm anxious to turn it over to the floor. There's so many things to think about, and I'm reminded by so many anecdotes. But my path was a little bit inverted. I always knew I wanted to be an architect. I had this vocation. I was the caricature of drawing, as a child, everything and anything I could. And I had always this professional track in mind. I was already very, very good student, applied early decision to my first choice to Cornell, and there you go, not accepted. I was rejected early decision, rejected regular decision, rejected every time. So that was like Rico, a moment of realignment, right? I ended up going to the second program at that time for architecture, close there, Rensselaer Polytechnic, upstate New York, coming all the way from Spain. And I'll get into my personal story in a second, but Rensselaer then start to have a series of extraordinary mentors. My tutors opened up their work to work alongside me. And I slowly learned that actually knowledge and teaching isn't about things that we know, but it is about co-producing knowledge. So I had a series of extraordinary instructors that said, in the same way that we're partners in what we're doing, this puts half of the responsibility of what we're doing onto you. So I was shaped by their advice, transferred out of Rensselaer and finished my undergraduate at the Architectural Association in London, worked for a number of years. And like Sully said, I'm just going to apply to one master's. If I don't get in, I just keep working. So I applied to one master's at Columbia. I was accepted, and applied to one PhD program at Princeton and was accepted. And throughout that time, if I can make one point tonight, is this idea of co-producing of knowledge. Those of you that are in my studios know that this is not about things that I know that I'm sharing, but rather co-producing it through our conversations. And that changes everything, because it not only opens up the conversation, but it puts us as partners. Of course, I love books. I love writing books. I love history. And just before I turn it over to the floor, I want to return back to May's image of Angelo's nose. And I am originally from Spain. I have two generations in my family that immigrated. They immigrated during the First World War. In the 19-teens, they immigrated to Cuba, and there were so many Spaniards in Cuba that they had to keep going and ended up in Mexico City. And then I have a second generation of immigrants during the Civil War in the 1940s who continued to go to Mexico. In fact, my grandfather, who was the oldest of seven, and at that time in Spain, if you were the oldest of seven, you went to the seminary. He took all his money, went across the border to France, and then boarded a boat and showed up in Havana, was found, and then he ended up in Mexico. And I'm reminded of, and maybe my early emphasis on professional stability had to do with this upbringing of always going back and forth. My parents immigrated to the US as well through professional means. Was this search for a homeland or for identity. Of course, in Mexico, we were Spanish, and in Spain, we were Mexican. And in the US, we were both Spanish and Mexican, which makes it really complicated. And I think of this contradiction and the paradox of the angel. I also think of the another paradox of Amanda Gorman's passage in The Poet Laureate, where and I began to speak with Rico about this when she tells us, the hill we climb, if only we dare, it's because being American is more than a pride we inherit. It's the past we also step into. So this paradox about the pride and the identity one inherits and the past that we step into. So in that sense, that space between both was so resonating with the Angelus Novus, the contradiction of the past and the winds of progress. So anyway, let me just turn it over. And what I can suggest to the students is, if you wouldn't mind, if you write your name in the chat, then I can call you out and you can just ask your questions in person rather than through the chat, which is impersonal. But I'll use the chat so that we don't all talk, don't all talk at once. So if you just write your name in the chat, then I call you out and then you can ask whatever you want. Unless you just want to go ahead and ask whatever you want. Anybody?
I guess I'll go first.
Okay. Yeah, good.
I just want to know, like, each of you guys, what was your most favorite experience from college? I know Dr. Sullivan mentioned the library, that not even his own school, but later will be. But like, anything else?
I forgot the social aspect. Back then, we had keggers. I can't imagine that happening today, right? But the drinking age was lower, and it was normal, right, back then. And that was really important because that was the place where everyone would socialize. So you got to meet other students there.
Fantastic.
One of my favorite experiences, I mean, it's just one random one that came to mind, but it was very special to me, was that was it my sophomore year, I took an English class that was called drama, and we read plays in it. That was what we did. And Sister Betsy Walsh was a professor. She's since retired, but she was so wonderful. And she took us to the Old Globe Theater. She got some money somehow, and she took us to the Old Globe Theater to see A Midsummer Night's Dream. And I had never I'd never gone to a theater like that or experienced a play like that. And it was just this really amazing experience. I didn't have a car or anything when I was in college, so I was like on campus all the time. So it was very special to go off campus and to go to such a special place. That was really cool.
I actually was thinking about sharing this thing that is, it's not necessarily my favorite experience, but I thought it would be maybe something you all can relate to because of this LLC program. We had a requirement at my school, which was called the LAC, the Liberal Arts Colloquium. And I think I was the only person who I knew who met the requirement in the first year, because I really liked, we had to go to 25 events, 25 lectures throughout all of college. I think I just liked going to the lectures so much that I did them all in the first year, and I would like go and take notes and talk to the speakers and do all of that. So this is probably not at all compelling or exciting, but I did mention that I went to study abroad in Thailand, and my school also had this strange program where, since we were in the Midwest and there wasn't a lot happening there, we could go study for a semester in Philadelphia. So I did that, and I'd be happy to share that experience with any of the students at some point.
Gosh, so hard to think of a favorite thing, but like Sully was saying, I could tell a lot of tales of hijinks that I got into in college, but I'll I'll forget those for now, and I'll say that it's, for me, a big thing is like the unexpected courses that left a really big impact on me. I took, just to fulfill a requirement, a history of classical music course, And it really transformed the way I looked at so many things. It gave me like a true love and understanding of classical music, but also of all music. So that like rock music and hip hop and stuff like that, I look at in a deeper and more appreciative way because I took that class. And then another one was I had a very, very conservative, religiously and politically upbringing. And I took this class called Race, Class, and Power. And it kicked my butt. It made me have to come to terms with a lot of facts that I didn't want to be facts. And it very, it didn't change my perspective in a day, but take my classes now and you'll see I'm quite different. But anyway.
Yeah. Fantastic. May, do you have
I have to say, okay, I think maybe my favorite will be, it's not as, because every other professor is really talking about the academic aspect. I'll say probably it's falling in love, I think. So I think I was a little bit old fashioned. I think it was the very first time in my life during college that, I began interested in, meeting a guy. So I think that happened during college. So I'll say that's very unique. It happened right, around that time. Yeah. So it's like my curiosity for knowledge and my curiosity for, the other sex that basically happened around the same time.
I have a couple of just very briefly, but I went a semester abroad to India, and I was with a group of fanatical architects, and we were going to visit all kinds of modern projects built by European architects all over India. And we saw them, and after 1 week, we began to really discover Indian architecture and Indian architects, and the depth, and breadth of that work, as it, its complexity far outweighed and that entire history, and that really opened my eyes in ways that I can't still to this day comprehend. And another anecdote was being in New York on 9/11. So I started my master's, and literally 3 weeks into our program, 9/11 happened, and the way that we turned, together and kept going to class. Columbia made a point that everyone would just keep, after a couple of days of reflections. So there are a number of things that happened that really changed your life. That changed my life in so many different ways of what I ended up working with and meeting, and yeah. Any other questions? More questions? Thank you, Kiara. Any more questions?
I saw a couple students turn their cameras on. Maybe they were going to ask
Yes.
Kai or Sydney.
Ask, dive in, no chat needed. Don't all talk at once. I thought I had to mitigate with the chat.
They were left speechless.
I'm going to start popcorning. I just learned this word, right? This is a verb now. I'm going to popcorn you. Anyone? Your camera's on. John, Isabella, I have some of my students too. I can just call them out.
I actually have a quick question for you, Professor Lopez Perez. I was wondering where you went to undergraduate school. I'm sorry if you already said that.
So my family was living in the US, then we moved back to Spain, and I applied to schools in the East Coast. My brother was studying math at Rensselaer Polytechnic in upstate New York. I was very intent in going to Cornell, and I did not get in. He was very intent in going to Carnegie Mellon. He did not get in. So we both ended up at RPI. I did 4 years at Rensselaer and then discovered that Rensselaer was a haven for retired British professors that taught over years and years at the Architectural Association. It's a small architectural school in London with a very deep history. So they encouraged me to transfer and finish my diploma at the AA. So that's my undergraduate. You don't have any other questions, Isabella? For everybody else, come on. This is a great panel. Come on.
And
Nope.
then I guess another question would be, how did you? I mean, we don't have much time, but how did you all choose to teach at USD?
Stacy, what do you think?
Oh, sorry, I wasn't
Oh.
trying to speak first just by unmuting, but
Oh,
well,
or
mine
Michael.
was kind of easy because I'm still working on my dissertation at UCSD, and I just happened to be available when a course needed to be taught for a maternity leave, and it was right in my research area. So I started off just teaching one class in Reformation literature, and I've been continuing on with a number of other classes too. So it just was lucky for me, but I'm sure other people have had more of a journey.
May, what do you think?
Okay, because I like California, yeah. So I did work hard to try to come to California to work. That's a big decision, and because we have family here, that's a big reason too.
Fantastic.
For me, it was, first of all, I don't know if you all know, it's really hard to get a job as a professor. but USD was actually my top choice. I had a friend that got a job here 5 years ahead of me, and I thought, well, there goes that chance. They'll never hire another one of us in the same department But the main reason why was because I went to UC Santa Barbara for my PhD in religious studies, and I loved being a graduate assistant teacher there. But I love that USD has a values based kind of mission statement as an educational institution, and so that we can, the professors can feel a lot more free to bring that kind of transformative and formative type of education, and not just information. Is part of what I really like about being at USD.
Fantastic. Well, I ended up here absolutely by accident, although I met my wife in New York, and she's from Ensenada, from San Diego. And we both concluded that, like Rico says, it's impossible to find faculty jobs where you want to be. You find any faculty job anywhere. And USD decided to start a new major in architecture. So that was an amazing opportunity. And I came, and we wrote the program absolutely based in the liberal arts core. So the opposite of all of my previous teaching, which had been in highly professional graduate programs, very specialized. And it's been wonderful. It's been such a privilege to watch it grow. Yeah. Okay. Everyone's so generous staying. Are there any last, I'm mindful of the time now, we are right at 8, but are there any one last question that anybody wants to sneak in for Debbie? I'm gonna get her to speak more. Any last question for anybody? I'm joking. Anybody? Any last question? Okay, well, thank you so much. Thanks everybody that came. This is going to be recorded. Tell your friends if they couldn't make it. And we will be sending updates on our schedule as we move. There is an LLC housing event coming up, and then we have 3 integration series events led by you rather than us towards the second half of the semester. But thank you, everybody. Thanks to our amazing panel. Thank you so much. And we'll see you soon.
Thank you
Thanks,
so
everyone.
much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
you.
Nice to see you all.
Thank you.